So in all the years that Hostel has been around, I'm 100% positive I won't be the first person to bring this up, but I'd love to see a Hostel Part 3. And the only way it makes sense to do it is if they make it a crossover movie with the Taken series, right? Where, I don't know, Liam Neeson's character's daughter gets kidnapped again, and this time it's by all the freaks in Hostel who, torture all the kids and stuff, and he like infiltrates the big warehouse and like kills everybody and snaps their necks and shoots them and does all his particular set of skills and just goes apeshit all over them. That would be the stunning conclusion to the Hostel series, the most appropriate way to end it, I think. And I'm serious, like I'm not kidding around. That would be ideal. I would love to see that legitimately. So whoever is in charge of the rights to both those movies, make that crossover happen. But isn't it funny how similar Hostel and Taken are, where it is about young students visiting Europe and they get kidnapped, but in Hostel, of course, the kids are kidnapped by this seedy underground uh, you know uh, club of people who I don't know get their jollies from torturing young travelers, and in Taken it's more about kidnapping these kids and selling them as sex slaves. Isn't it funny though that Hostel is considered trashy horror movie in bad taste, yet I mean, despite what maybe you hear from like a friend of a friend, not many kids are going missing in Europe and like sold to these torture chambers. It is a work of fantasy. Meanwhile, there very much is a sex trafficking trade where people do get kidnapped and sold as sex slaves. So really, what's the more exploitive movie? What's the more in poor taste kind of movie? We kind of generally accept Taken as like this fun, cool Liam Neeson kicks the shit out of everybody action movie, but I don't know. Maybe it's in kind of poor taste. Both are good movies. I don't know, but something to think about, I guess. But anyway, I'm going to be talking about Hostel today. Actually, hopefully I'll be talking about both movies, but for this review I'll be talking about Hostel Part 1. Did a double feature for October time. What a better time. And, whether you like Eli Roth's movies or not, or whether you like Hostel or Hostel Part 2 or not, you do kind of have to give Hostel and Hostel Part 2 at least a little bit of credit because it did come from that magical period of time in the mid 2000s where every fucking horror movie was getting remade, or possibly every franchise, such as, the Halloween movies, the Jason movies, even to some extent the Freddy movies, the Chucky movies. They're all kind of on their last legs dying, and we're getting like really shitty sequels in the early 2000s. So here's an original work. Original story somewhat. I mean, it's not like the first movie to show crazy people like killing people in Europe and kids going missing and things like that. So I would give it credit for at least that, and how it is an original work, and Eli Roth kind of knows his stuff, and I think it's, to be quite honest, I think it is like a better written movie than it gets credit for, because we have this stuff where, okay, it's like a group of dumb American boys. Well, two are American. The other is from Iceland, I think. Who, like, he's a little bit older than them, and it's kind of weird. And he kind of talks like Goldmember from Austin Powers 3, where he's like, "I am from Iceland. Isn't that weird?" Kind of like that, which is funny. And he's a very funny character. But they're the stupid fucking kids who just want to get laid, and that's what they're all doing. And like one of the kids, he's just gone through a bad breakup, right? And he's like, "Oh, I can't get over. I don't know what the fuck's her name, Jennifer or Betsy or whatever the fuck. I don't know." And, they're going around, going to the clubs, trying to get laid, and going to a whorehouse, and trying to get laid, and it's just not working. Then they go into the hostel, and they discover that there's this promised land of the sweetest, best, sexiest women you've ever seen. And they're like, "Yeah, we're gonna get some pussy," and whatever. But that's kind of the hook. And what's interesting about the movie is like how, I don't know, like specific the process is with this underground torture club, basically, where there is such a specific way to get these kids lured in. Where we have the hostel, they go into the room. The room is, of course, room 237. Nice touch, and kind of the first titillation is that I guess these girls who I suppose basically prostitutes who work for the killer club, torture chamber club, whatever it's called, basically, and like the first kind of act in their little game is that okay, we just slightly see them getting dressed and we get a quick cheap thrill at them and they're like come into the spa, and that's like part of the routine, that's part of the thing, and then they get close to them and lure them in. They have a night of passionate lovemaking, and then boom, they're kidnapped and brought into the torture chamber. So I don't know, it's an interesting like kind of hunt, an interesting process where they must do this over and over and over again, where I mean it works. I mean, if you want to catch like an animal, you put out like food, right? In this case, you want to catch young dumb American idiots, you put out a beautiful woman who's going to sleep with them, and boom, there you go. And so the movie's basically all about of the group to get captured, to get killed. Other guy gets very lucky. He like falls asleep drunk in like a janitor's closet, and then he discovers that something's not quite right, and he kind of figures everything out, and everything unfolds, and it becomes his I don't know, his fight for survival, basically, in finding out what's going on and capturing a girl that he met too, this Japanese girl who's also been kidnapped and things like that. So it's a survival movie, basically, and it has all the titillations of kind of a cheap grindhouse horror movie where we have the beautiful naked women, which is always a staple of these movies. And I guess the movie was filmed in Iceland or so, but very beautiful women in the movie. We have the gore effects, the people being tortured and all that, and very good gore effects. I believe it's K&B, and they're the guys when it comes to movie special effects, gore or otherwise, really. So very impressive in that respect. And I guess that's basically it. It's definitely a movie where you can kind of give it the stamp of torture porn, where, I don't know, something like Saw, or something even like The Human Centipede, both of which I talked about this month, you can kind of almost make an argument for them, like, against being torture porn. It's like, okay, it's really this story here, blah, 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 blah. But with, like, Hostel, it's kind of hard to argue against it because it's literally about people who, like, get off on torturing people. That's the fucking plot of the movie. So it's kind of hard to, I don't know, declassify it as torture porn. And I'm sure there's people who watch this who will, like, go right to those parts and be like, whatever. But I don't know. I think it's a decent movie. Not one of my favorites, but I don't know. It's good, and I think it has its place. Particularly kind of in that era of horror where it was somewhat destitute. I think it's getting better now, but we have very few kind of examples of good original horror from the aughts, basically. And I think the first Saw, I don't know. I think it made its mark, and I think it's a good movie. Quite frankly, I kind of like the second one a little bit better, but I'll be talking about that later. In the meantime, be sure to comment, rate, subscribe, all that good stuff. Stay tuned for more 31 Days of Horror. We're approaching the end here. Let's try and make it worth it. Let's do a lot of reviews, and until next time, I'll see you later, and stay scared.